The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds of Kensington Palace as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell adjusted her earpiece for the third time. She had been part of Prince George's protection detail for 18 months, but the nervous energy never fully disappeared. Today felt different somehow, though she couldn't put her finger on why. Prince George, now 10 years old, bounded down the marble steps of the palace entrance, his school bag slung carelessly over his shoulder. His enthusiasm for the day ahead was infectious, and even the usually stoic palace staff couldn't help but smile as he chattered excitedly about his upcoming science project on space exploration. "Good morning, Inspector Mitchell," George called, out cheerfully, using the formal address his parents had taught him when speaking to his protection officers in public. The young prince had grown accustomed to the constant presence of security, treating them more like extended family members than guards. Sarah smiled warmly at the boy. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness. Ready for another day of learning about rockets and stars?" She had made it her business to know about George's interests, finding that genuine conversation helped maintain the delicate balance between protection and allowing the child to feel normal. The convoy of vehicles waited in the circular driveway, engines running smoothly in the crisp morning air. The lead car would carry advanced security. The second vehicle housed Prince George and his immediate protection team, while the third served as backup and surveillance. It was a routine they had performed hundreds of times, yet Sarah's training demanded she treat each journey as if it were the first. As they settled into the armored vehicle, George peered out the tinted windows at the familiar London streets beginning to wake up. Shopkeepers were raising their shutters. Early commuters hurried along sidewalks with coffee cups in hand, and the city slowly transformed from its peaceful dawn state into the bustling metropolis it would become. "Inspector, do you think there are really aliens out there?" George asked, his young mind still focused on his school project. His genuine curiosity and intelligence never failed to impress the adults around him. Despite his royal status, he remained remarkably grounded and inquisitive about the world beyond palace walls. Sarah engaged him in conversation about the possibilities of life on other planets, all while maintaining her professional awareness of their surroundings. Her eyes regularly scanned the streets, monitoring the positions of pedestrians, checking for unusual vehicle behavior, and staying in constant communication with the other security vehicles through her nearly invisible earpiece. The route to Thomas's Battersea, George's school, had been carefully planned and regularly varied to prevent predictable patterns. Today's path would take them through several of London's quieter residential areas before approaching the school from the southwest. The journey typically took 25 minutes, allowing time for careful observation of their environment. As they moved through the morning traffic, Sarah noticed her colleague, Detective Constable James Park, seemed more alert than usual. His hand rested casually near his concealed weapon, and his eyes moved constantly between the side mirrors and the road ahead. When their eyes met in the rear-view mirror, he gave an almost imperceptible nod that told her he too sensed something was off about this seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. The radio crackled softly with routine communications between the security vehicles. "All clear on approach to Checkpoint 1, came the voice from the lead car. Everything appeared normal, yet the experienced officers couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched more closely than usual. Prince George continued his animated discussion about space exploration, completely unaware of the heightened tension among his protectors. This innocence was exactly what they were trained to preserve. Their job was not just to keep him safe, but to allow him to experience as normal a childhood as possible, given his extraordinary circumstances. As they approached a traffic light in the affluent neighborhood of Chelsea, Sarah's attention was caught by a white van parked awkwardly on the side street. The vehicle itself wasn't unusual, but something about its positioning and the fact that she could see movement inside made her mental notes more detailed. The driver appeared to be watching their convoy rather than focusing on whatever legitimate business he might have in the area. "Control, we have a possible surveillance vehicle at Checkpoint 2. She spoke quietly into her microphone, using coded language that wouldn't alarm Prince George. The response came immediately. confirming that additional units were being positioned to investigate the suspicious vehicle without interfering with the royal convoy's progress. The traffic light turned green, and they continued toward the school. George had moved on from discussing aliens to describing his plans for the upcoming half-term holiday, his excitement evident in every word. He spoke about wanting to visit the Science Museum again and perhaps convincing his parents to take him to the observatory at Greenwich. Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation while simultaneously processing the stream of information flowing through her earpiece. The suspicious white van had pulled out shortly after their convoy passed and was now maintaining a distance of approximately 200 meters behind them. This behavior was enough to elevate the situation from routine caution to active concern. "We may have a tail," James murmured, his voice barely audible but clearly picked up by Sarah's trained ear. She glanced at Prince George, who was now looking through his school bag to ensure he had everything needed for his science presentation. His complete trust in their ability to keep him safe was both heartwarming and sobering. The convoy took its planned turn onto Battersea Bridge Road, and sure enough, the white van followed. Sarah's training kicked into high gear as she began mentally reviewing emergency protocols while maintaining her conversation with George about his favorite constellations. The delicate balance of keeping a young boy calm while preparing for potential danger required every ounce of her professional experience and emotional control. The white van had been following them for 7 minutes now, maintaining the same careful distance through 3 turns and 2 traffic lights. Sarah's instincts, honed through years of protection work, were screaming that this was no coincidence. She watched as the van's driver seemed to be speaking into a communication device, though she couldn't make out specific details through the tinted rear window of their own vehicle. Prince George had finished organizing his school bag and was now gazing out the window, pointing excitedly at a red double-decker bus that had pulled alongside them at another traffic light. "Look, Inspector Mitchell, that bus has an advertisement for the new Marvel film. Do you think my parents might let me see it this weekend?" His innocent enthusiasm provided a stark contrast to the tension building among his protection team. "I'm sure if you ask nicely, they'll consider it," Sarah replied, her voice warm and reassuring despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. She pressed a small button on her watch, sending a silent alert to the command center that would immediately flag their convoy as potentially compromised. Detective Constable Park was now openly monitoring their tail through multiple mirrors, his body language shifting into the subtle but unmistakable posture of an officer preparing for action. The lead security vehicle had received their coded warnings and was already beginning to implement contingency protocols that would allow them to change routes if necessary. As they approached the final stretch before Thomas's Battersea, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. A second white van, nearly identical to the first, had appeared in the oncoming traffic lane and was now driving parallel to their position. This was no longer a surveillance operation. It was beginning to look like a coordinated attempt to box in their convoy. "Control, we now have 2 suspicious vehicles in close proximity." Sarah spoke into her microphone, her voice calm but urgent, requesting immediate backup and possible route diversion. The response came within seconds, confirming that armed response units were being deployed and alternative secure locations were being prepared. Prince George noticed the change in atmosphere among his protectors, though he couldn't identify exactly what was different. "Is everything all right, Inspector?" he asked, his young face showing the first signs of concern. Sarah had to make a split-second decision about how much to reveal without causing panic. "We're just being extra careful today, Your Highness. Sometimes we change our route to make sure everything stays safe and secure," she explained, reaching over to gently squeeze his shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. "Would you like to play a game while we drive? We could see who can spot the most red cars." The distraction worked momentarily, but George was an intelligent boy who had grown up understanding that his life was different from other children. He nodded and began looking for red cars, but Sarah could see in his reflection that he was also watching the faces of his protectors for clues about what was really happening. The 2 white vans were now clearly working in coordination, with the first maintaining its position behind the convoy while the second had pulled ahead and was attempting to slow their progress by driving just below the speed limit. This was a classic pincer movement, designed to control the target vehicle's speed and direction while additional assets moved into position. James was now in constant communication with the lead vehicle, and Sarah could hear fragments of terse professional exchanges through her earpiece. Possible abduction attempt in progress. Need immediate extraction options. School is compromised as destination. The gravity of the situation was becoming undeniable. "Inspector, I found 3 red cars already," George announced proudly, though his voice carried a slight tremor that suggested he was picking up on the tension, despite the adult's efforts to shield him. "Are we going to be late for school? Mrs. Henderson doesn't like it when students arrive after the morning bell." Sarah's mind raced through their options. Continuing to the school was clearly no longer viable, as it would lead them into a predictable location where additional hostile forces might be waiting. The alternative was to implement an emergency extraction, which would involve high-speed evasive maneuvers and a rapid journey to one of several secure government facilities scattered throughout London. "You know what, Your Highness? I think we might take a little detour this morning," Sarah said, her voice maintaining its calm, friendly tone despite the critical situation developing around them. "Sometimes we like to show you different parts of London that you might not have seen before." The lead vehicle had already begun implementing the diversion protocol, smoothly changing lanes and taking an unexpected left turn that would lead them away from the school and toward the nearest secure facility. The white vans immediately adjusted their positions, confirming beyond any doubt that they were actively pursuing the royal convoy rather than simply traveling in the same direction by coincidence. As they turned onto a wider road that would allow for higher speeds and more maneuvering options, Sarah noticed that George had stopped looking for red cars and was now watching her face intently. Despite his young age, he possessed the sharp intelligence that seemed to run in his family, and he was beginning to understand that this was not a routine journey to school. "Are those cars following us?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying the first real note of fear. Sarah realized that continuing to deflect his questions might actually make him more anxious than providing him with a careful, age-appropriate explanation of what was happening. "Some people are being a bit too curious about where we're going today," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "So we're going to take you somewhere completely safe while other officers figure out what those people want. You're not in any real danger because we're all here to protect you, but we're going to be extra careful today." Prince George nodded, solemnly, his young face showing remarkable composure given the circumstances. "Should I call Mummy and Papa?" he asked, reaching for the secure mobile phone that all members of the royal family carried for emergency communications. "Let's wait just a few more minutes," Sarah suggested. "We want to make sure we have everything under control before we worry them unnecessarily." In truth, she knew that Prince William and Catherine had already been automatically notified of the potential threat through the palace's emergency communication system, and were likely already being briefed by senior security officials. The convoy was now traveling at significantly higher speeds, weaving through London traffic with the practiced precision of highly trained drivers. The 2 white vans were struggling to keep pace without drawing attention from other motorists and traffic cameras, but they remained persistent in their pursuit. Sarah could see additional law enforcement vehicles beginning to appear at strategic points along their route, ready to intervene if the situation escalated further. The convoy had been traveling at emergency speeds for 12 minutes when Sarah noticed a 3rd vehicle had joined the pursuit. This one was a dark sedan, more subtle than the white vans, but moving with the same deliberate intent. Her heart rate spiked as she realized they were dealing with a sophisticated operation involving multiple coordinated assets and professional-level planning. Prince George had grown quieter during the high-speed journey, his hands gripping the edge of his seat, as the armored vehicle navigated sharp turns and sudden lane changes. Despite his obvious anxiety, he showed remarkable maturity, asking no more questions and trusting his protectors to handle the situation. His composure was both impressive and heartbreaking for the adults charged with his safety. "Control, we now have 3 confirmed hostile vehicles in active pursuit," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Request immediate tactical support at the next intersection." The response crackled through her earpiece. Armed, response teams were moving into position, and helicopter surveillance was being deployed to track the pursuing vehicles from above. Detective Constable Park had drawn his concealed weapon, though he kept it positioned where Prince George couldn't see it. His role was to provide close protection for the young royal while Sarah coordinated with the broader security response. Years of training had prepared them for exactly this type of scenario. But the reality of protecting a child while under active threat brought an emotional weight that no amount of preparation could fully address. The lead vehicle suddenly swerved into a narrow side street, executing a pre-planned evasive maneuver designed to break visual contact with their pursuers. The convoy's armored vehicles could navigate tight spaces that larger civilian vehicles might struggle with, potentially giving them an advantage. However, the pursuing sedan proved more agile than expected, following them into the narrow passage, while the white vans were forced to seek alternative routes. "Your Highness, we're going to play another game," Sarah announced, forcing cheer into her voice. "I want you to close your eyes and count to 100. When you open them, we'll be somewhere completely safe and this will all be over." It was a white lie designed to keep the boy calm during the most dangerous part of their escape, when visibility would be limited and the risk of confrontation highest. George obediently closed his eyes and began counting aloud, his young voice providing an incongruous soundtrack to the tactical operation unfolding around him. 1, 2, 3, 4. His trust in the adults protecting him was absolute, even in circumstances that would terrify most grown-ups. The narrow street opened onto a busy commercial area where the convoy could blend into heavier traffic. However, their pursuers had anticipated this move, and Sarah could see that the dark sedan was still behind them, while at least one of the white vans had managed to circle around and position itself ahead of their likely route. 15, 16, 17. Prince George continued counting, completely unaware that armed police units were now converging on their location from multiple directions. Sarah could hear radio chatter indicating that surveillance drones had acquired visual contact with all three pursuing vehicles and were tracking their movements in real time. The situation reached a critical point when the white van ahead of them suddenly stopped in the middle of the road, blocking their forward progress. This was clearly a coordinated attempt to trap the royal convoy between multiple hostile vehicles. James immediately radioed their position to all available backup units while preparing for the possibility of a direct confrontation. 41, 42, 43. George's innocent counting continued as Sarah made rapid calculations about their options. Backing up would put them directly into the path of the pursuing sedan, while going forward would require ramming through the roadblock created by the white van. The lead security vehicle made the decision for them, accelerating toward the blocking van while signaling the convoy to follow closely behind. The specially reinforced bumper of the police vehicle struck the rear corner of the white van, spinning it aside and creating enough space for the royal convoy to pass through. Prince George felt the impact but kept his eyes closed and continued counting as instructed. 67, 68, 69. His unwavering obedience in such a frightening situation demonstrated the remarkable trust he placed in his protectors, making their responsibility feel even more profound. As they cleared the roadblock, Sarah could see armed officers emerging from concealed positions to surround the disabled white van. The operation to capture the would-be kidnappers was now fully underway, with multiple law enforcement agencies coordinating to ensure that every member of the conspiracy would be apprehended. The pursuing sedan, realizing that their carefully planned operation had been compromised, attempted to flee the scene by turning down a side street. However, police motorcycles had been positioned to cut off all escape routes, and Sarah watched with satisfaction as the vehicle was quickly surrounded, and its occupants forced to surrender. 95, 96, 97. George was nearing the end of his count, and Sarah knew they would soon reach the secure government facility where he could be kept safe, while the investigation into the abduction attempt continued. The immediate danger had passed, but the emotional impact of the morning's events would require careful handling. 99, 100. Prince George opened his eyes and looked around, surprised to find himself in an unfamiliar underground parking garage surrounded by serious-looking adults in suits. "Inspector Mitchell, where are we? This doesn't look like school." Sarah knelt down to George's eye level, her expression gentle but honest. "Your Highness, some people tried to do something very wrong today, but we stopped them. You're completely safe now and your parents are on their way to see you." You were incredibly brave during our adventure, and I'm very proud of how well you handled everything." The young prince processed this information with the remarkable emotional intelligence that had always impressed the adults around him. "Were those bad people trying to hurt me?" he asked, his voice small but steady. "They wanted to take you away from your family, but we never let that happen," Sarah replied truthfully. "And now they can't hurt you or anyone else because the police have caught them all." She could see relief washing over George's face as he realized that the frightening morning was truly over, and that he was surrounded by people who had successfully protected him from harm. As they waited in the secure facility for Prince William and Catherine to arrive, George sat quietly beside Sarah, occasionally asking questions about what would happen next. His resilience in the face of such a traumatic experience was remarkable, but she knew that trained counselors would need to help him process the emotional impact of being targeted by criminals simply because of who he was born to be. Within 30 minutes of reaching the secure facility, Prince William and Catherine arrived, their faces pale with worry but relief evident in their eyes as they saw their son safe and unharmed. George ran to his parents, his earlier composure finally giving way to the natural need for comfort from those who loved him most. The reunion was both heartwarming and heartbreaking for the security team who had witnessed the young boy's courage throughout the ordeal. "Mummy, Papa, Inspector Mitchell, and everyone kept me safe," George said as he hugged his parents tightly. "Some bad people wanted to take me away, but the officers were too clever for them." His ability to recount the morning's events with such clarity and resilience impressed everyone present, though Catherine's tears showed how deeply the near miss had affected the entire family. Prince William shook hands with each member of the protection team, his gratitude evident in every word. "Thank you for bringing our son home safely," he said to Sarah, his voice thick with emotion. "We can never fully express how much your quick thinking and professionalism mean to our family." The weight of royal protocol seemed to fall away in that moment, replaced by the simple gratitude of parents whose child had been protected from harm. While the royal family had their private reunion, Sarah and her colleagues were debriefed by senior officials who had rushed to the scene. The investigation into the attempted abduction was already well underway, with forensic teams examining the captured vehicles and interrogation specialists preparing to question the arrested suspects. Initial reports suggested this had been a sophisticated operation planned over several months. Detective Chief Inspector Robert Hayes, Sarah's superior, pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Your instincts this morning potentially saved Prince George's life," he told her quietly. "The early warning you provided allowed us to mobilize resources before the situation became critical. The royal family owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid." Sarah felt a mix of pride and exhaustion as the adrenaline from the morning's events began to wear off. "We were just doing our job, sir," she replied, though she knew this had been far from a routine day. "What's the initial assessment of who was behind this?" The question that had been nagging at her throughout the crisis was finally being addressed by the investigation team. The preliminary findings were disturbing. The would-be kidnappers appeared to be part of an organized criminal network with potential international connections, not the work of unstable individuals acting alone. This suggested that the threat to the royal family might be more serious and widespread than initially thought, with implications for security protocols going forward. Prince George seemed to be coping well with the traumatic experience, chatting animatedly with his parents about the adventure he had been on. Child psychologists were standing by to provide support if needed, but his natural resilience and the quick resolution of the crisis seemed to have minimized the potential for lasting trauma. His ability to trust the adults around him had likely played a crucial role in his psychological protection. As the afternoon progressed, more details emerged about the failed abduction plot. The 3 vehicles had been stolen specifically for this operation, fitted with false license plates, and driven by individuals with no previous criminal records who had been recruited through encrypted online channels. The level of planning and coordination suggested significant financial backing and professional criminal expertise. Catherine sat with George in a comfortable waiting room, reading him stories and playing quiet games to help normalize the day after such an extraordinary morning. Her maternal instincts had taken over completely, and she seemed determined to surround her son with as much love and security as possible. The sight of them together reinforced for everyone present exactly what had been at stake during the morning's crisis. Meanwhile, Prince William was meeting with security officials to discuss potential changes to George's protection arrangements. While they had successfully thwarted this attempt, the sophistication of the plot suggested that future threats might be equally well planned and coordinated. The delicate balance between security and allowing George to have a normal childhood would need to be recalibrated. Sarah found herself reflecting on how quickly a routine morning had transformed into a life-or-death situation. Her training had prepared her for such scenarios, but the reality of protecting a child under active threat had tested every aspect of her professional and emotional capabilities. The successful outcome was a testament to the coordination and dedication of the entire protection team. The investigation team began sharing their preliminary findings with the protection officers. The arrested suspects included 2 British nationals and 1 foreign individual whose identity was still being verified. Electronic devices seized from the vehicles contained evidence of extensive surveillance of royal family movements and detailed plans for the abduction attempt that had been months in the making. As evening approached, arrangements were made to transport Prince George back to Kensington Palace under enhanced security protocols. The school had been informed that he would not be attending classes for the remainder of the week while security assessments were completed and potential ongoing threats evaluated. His teachers and classmates would be told only that he was unwell, maintaining the privacy that was essential for both his safety and his psychological well-being. George seemed disappointed that his science presentation about space exploration would have to be postponed. But he accepted the explanation that sometimes important safety concerns had to take priority over school activities. His understanding and maturity in processing these unusual circumstances continued to impress all the adults involved in his protection. The media had caught wind that some kind of security incident had occurred involving the royal family, but official statements remained vague, describing only enhanced security measures without confirming any specific threat. This careful management of information was crucial to prevent copycat attempts and to avoid giving the arrested conspirators any additional publicity that might inspire others. Before leaving the secure facility, Sarah had one final conversation with Prince George. "Your Highness, you were incredibly brave today," she told him. "You followed instructions perfectly and helped us keep you safe. Your parents should be very proud of how grown-up you were during our adventure." George smiled at the praise, though she could see in his eyes that he understood the morning had been more serious than any adventure should be. "Inspector Mitchell, will those bad people ever be able to hurt me or my family again?" His question showed that despite his resilience, he was still processing the reality that there were people in the world who might wish him harm simply because of who he was. "They will never have another chance to hurt you," Sarah assured him with complete conviction. "And we're going to make sure that anyone else who might have bad ideas knows that the police and your protection team are always watching and always ready to keep you safe." Her promise was both genuine and necessary, representing the unwavering commitment that came with the responsibility of protecting the future of the British monarchy. 3 weeks after the attempted abduction, the full scope of the criminal conspiracy began to emerge through detailed investigations conducted by multiple law enforcement agencies. The plot had involved 7 individuals across 3 countries, with funding traced to offshore accounts linked to extremist organizations seeking to destabilize the British monarchy. The sophistication of the operation shocked even experienced counter-terrorism specialists. Sarah Mitchell found herself at the center of a media storm when news outlets learned of her crucial role in thwarting the kidnapping attempt. Despite official efforts to maintain her anonymity, her quick thinking and professional competence had made her a symbol of dedicated public service. The attention was uncomfortable for someone trained to work in the shadows, but she handled the recognition with the same professionalism she had shown during the crisis itself. Prince George had returned to school under significantly enhanced security arrangements that remained as invisible as possible to maintain his sense of normalcy. Additional plainclothes officers were positioned around Thomas's Battersea, and his journey to and from school now involved randomized routes with multiple backup plans. Despite these changes, his teachers reported that he seemed to be adjusting well and showed no signs of lasting trauma from his frightening experience. The investigation revealed that the criminal network had been conducting surveillance on the royal family for over 8 months, documenting their routines and identifying potential vulnerability points. Advanced technology had been used to track vehicles, monitor communications, and even attempt to infiltrate security systems. The level of planning and resources involved suggested connections to serious organized crime or potentially hostile foreign interests. Detective Chief Inspector Hayes called Sarah into his office for a private meeting that would change the trajectory of her career. The Home Secretary has personally requested that you be considered for promotion to head a new specialized unit focused on protecting high-value targets, he informed her. Your performance during the Prince George incident has been noted at the highest levels of government. Sarah was honored by the recognition but found herself conflicted about leaving her current role. She had developed a genuine fondness for Prince George and felt a personal investment in his continued safety. The young prince had shown remarkable resilience, but she worried about how he might react to yet another change in his protection arrangement so soon after such a traumatic experience. Meanwhile, the royal family was grappling with difficult decisions about how to balance security concerns with their desire to give their children as normal an upbringing as possible. The failed abduction attempt had highlighted vulnerabilities in their current arrangements, but increasing security measures risked further isolating Prince George from the ordinary experiences of childhood that his parents valued so highly. Prince William and Catherine met privately with senior security officials to discuss long-term strategies for protecting their family while maintaining their public duties and personal values. The attempted kidnapping had been a wake-up call about the evolving nature of threats facing the monarchy, requiring adaptive approaches that could address both traditional security concerns and new forms of criminal sophistication. The arrested conspirators were providing limited cooperation with investigators, but digital forensics had uncovered extensive planning documents that revealed backup plans and contingencies the criminals had developed. Multiple potential abduction scenarios had been considered, including attempts at other locations such as the school, during public appearances, and even at private family events. The thoroughness of their preparation was deeply disturbing. George had begun asking more questions about why his security arrangements had changed, showing the natural curiosity of an intelligent child trying to understand his world. His parents struggled with how much to explain about the ongoing investigation and the broader security implications without frightening him or making him feel different from his classmates in ways that might affect his social development. Sarah received a personal letter from Prince William and Catherine expressing their gratitude for her service and inviting her to a private dinner at Kensington Palace. The gesture was unprecedented in her experience and reflected the genuine bond that had formed between the protection officer and the family she served. The invitation also represented the royal family's desire to personally thank someone who had risked her life for their child. The broader implications of the thwarted abduction extended beyond the immediate royal family to questions about security for other high-profile individuals and potential targets. Government officials were reviewing protection protocols for politicians, judges, and other public figures who might be vulnerable to similar sophisticated criminal operations. The case had become a catalyst for examining weaknesses in current security frameworks. International cooperation in the investigation had revealed connections to similar plots targeting prominent families in other countries, suggesting that the threat was part of a broader pattern of organized crime-seeking, high-value targets for political or financial gain. Intelligence agencies across Europe were sharing information and coordinating responses to what appeared to be an emerging form of sophisticated criminal enterprise. Prince George's teachers reported that he had written a composition about heroes in everyday life that focused on police officers and security guards who keep people safe. His ability to process the traumatic experience and find positive meaning in it impressed child psychologists who were monitoring his emotional well-being. His resilience seemed to be aided by his understanding that good people had protected him from bad ones. The trial preparations for the arrested conspirators revealed the extent to which modern criminal networks could leverage technology and international connections to plan sophisticated operations. Prosecutors were working with security agencies to ensure that sensitive information about royal protection methods wouldn't be disclosed during legal proceedings, while still building strong cases against the defendants. Sarah's recommendation for promotion came with an opportunity to help redesign security protocols for high-value targets across the United Kingdom. Her experience during the Prince George incident provided valuable insights into how traditional protection methods needed to evolve to address contemporary threats. The role would be challenging but offered the chance to influence security policy at a national level. As the investigation continued, evidence emerged that the abduction plot had been just one part of a larger criminal enterprise focused on targeting wealthy and prominent families across Europe. The successful intervention in Prince George's case had likely prevented not only immediate harm to the royal family, but had also disrupted a network that might have threatened many other innocent people. The royal family's public schedule had been quietly adjusted to incorporate lessons learned from the incident, with fewer predictable routines and more flexible arrangements that would make future surveillance and planning more difficult for potential threats. These changes were implemented subtly to avoid drawing public attention to ongoing security concerns, while still maintaining the family's commitment to their official duties and public service. 6 months after the thwarted abduction attempt, Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell stood in the same circular driveway at Kensington Palace where the crisis had begun. This time, however, she was there to say goodbye to the family she had protected and served with such dedication. Her promotion to head the new Specialized Protection Unit had been confirmed, and today marked her final day as Prince George's personal protection officer. Prince George, now 11 years old, had grown noticeably in both stature and maturity since that frightening morning. The attempted kidnapping seemed to have strengthened rather than diminished his natural confidence, and he had developed a deeper appreciation for the people who worked to keep him and his family safe. His relationship with Sarah had evolved into something resembling friendship within the boundaries of their professional roles. "Inspector Mitchell, will you still be protecting other children like me?" George asked as they walked through the palace gardens one last time together. His question showed the empathy and concern for others that his parents had worked so hard to instill in him, despite his privileged circumstances. The traumatic experience had not made him fearful, but rather more aware of the challenges faced by those who dedicated their lives to serving others. Sarah smiled at his thoughtfulness. "I'll be helping to make sure that all the officers who protect important people like you have the best training and resources possible," she explained. "In a way, I'll still be helping to keep you safe, just from a different position." Her new role would indeed involve developing better protection strategies based on lessons learned from the Prince George incident and other security challenges. The criminal trial had concluded 2 weeks earlier with convictions on all counts for the 7 conspirators involved in the abduction plot. The sentences ranged from 12 to 25 years in a prison, sending a clear message about the consequences of targeting members of the royal family. The international cooperation required to dismantle the criminal network had strengthened relationships between law enforcement agencies across multiple countries. Prince William and Catherine had personally thanked Sarah during a private ceremony at Buckingham Palace, where she received a commendation for exceptional service to the crown. The recognition was meaningful, not just as professional acknowledgement, but as validation of the personal bond she had formed with the family during such a critical time in their lives. The new security arrangements for Prince George had been refined based on comprehensive analysis of the failed abduction attempt. Advanced technology now supplemented human judgment in threat assessment, and communication systems had been upgraded to ensure even faster response times if future emergencies arose. However, the most important lesson had been the value of experienced officers who could read situations and make split-second decisions that technology alone could never replicate. Detective Constable James Park had been promoted to take over Sarah's role as Prince George's lead protection officer. His performance during the crisis had demonstrated the same instincts and professional competence that made Sarah such an effective guardian. The continuity of having someone familiar in the position would help ease the transition for Prince George, who had come to trust and rely on the officers who formed his security detail. The broader investigation had uncovered evidence of similar criminal networks operating across Europe, targeting wealthy families, government officials, and public figures for kidnapping and extortion. Sarah's new unit would coordinate international efforts to identify and disrupt these sophisticated criminal enterprises before they could execute their plans. The Prince George case had become a template for understanding how modern criminals operated and how law enforcement needed to evolve to counter these threats. During their final conversation, Prince George surprised Sarah with a handwritten letter expressing his gratitude for her protection and friendship. The letter, written in his careful 11-year-old handwriting, described how her calm presence during the frightening morning had helped him feel safe even when he didn't fully understand what was happening. He included a drawing of himself and Sarah standing together outside Kensington Palace, both smiling under a bright sun. "Your Highness, this letter means more to me than any official recognition I could receive," Sarah told him, genuinely moved by his thoughtfulness. "You showed incredible courage that day, and watching you grow stronger from such a difficult experience has been one of the greatest privileges of my career." The bond between protector and protected had transcended their professional relationship, creating a mutual respect that would last long after their working relationship ended. The royal family had established a new scholarship program in honor of the protection officers who had prevented the abduction, funding advanced security training for law enforcement personnel across the Commonwealth. This initiative reflected their commitment to improving security capabilities while honoring the dedication of those who risked their lives in service to others. Prince George had returned to his normal school routine, though with enhanced security, measures that remained largely invisible to his classmates and teachers. His resilience in the aftermath of the trauma had impressed child psychologists, who attributed his positive recovery to the quick resolution of the crisis and the strong support system provided by his family and protection team. The failed abduction attempt had led to significant changes in how high-profile families across Britain approached personal security. The sophistication of the criminal plot had demonstrated that traditional protection methods needed to be supplemented with advanced intelligence gathering and international cooperation to stay ahead of evolving threats. Sarah's farewell ceremony was attended by senior officials from multiple law enforcement agencies, reflecting the respect she had earned within the security community. Her success in protecting Prince George had elevated her profile within government circles, and her insights into modern protection challenges were already influencing policy discussions at the highest levels. As she prepared to leave Kensington Palace for the final time as Prince George's protection officer, Sarah reflected on how the traumatic morning 6 months earlier had changed not just her career but her understanding of the profound responsibility that came with protecting innocent lives. The experience had taught her that successful security work required not just professional competence but genuine care for the people being protected. Prince George waved goodbye from the palace steps, flanked by his new protection team but still maintaining the cheerful demeanor that had endeared him to everyone who worked to keep him safe. His ability to trust new people, while remembering those who had served him, demonstrated the emotional intelligence that would serve him well as he grew into his future role within the royal family. The criminal network responsible for the abduction attempt had been completely dismantled, with arrests made in 4 countries and millions of pounds in criminal assets seized. The international cooperation required to achieve this success had created new partnerships between law enforcement agencies that would continue to benefit security efforts across Europe for years to come. Sarah's new role would take her across the country and around the world, working with security professionals to develop better protection strategies for high-value targets. However, she knew that her most important case would always be the morning when quick thinking and professional dedication had kept a young prince safe from those who would have used him to strike at the heart of the British monarchy. As her car pulled away from Kensington Palace, Sarah smiled at the sight of Prince George playing in the garden with his siblings, surrounded by the invisible security net that would protect him throughout his life. The successful resolution of the abduction attempt had proven that when good people worked together with skill and determination, they could triumph over even the most sophisticated criminal threats. The young prince could continue growing up, with the knowledge that there would always be dedicated professionals watching over him, ensuring that his future remained bright and secure.